In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how you can improve the quality of the responses you get from any AI model, especially if you work with a specific context. We'll be using a combination of different tools such as RAG and also knowledge graphs that allow us to visualize the content of the knowledge base and see the main topics inside using the tool called InfraNodus. I will also show you how you can use Dify, which is a great open source tool for building this kind of workflows that can integrate this augmented data into your responses and how you can generate a chatbot with it. And I will be doing that all using the example of our own support portal. That's like a real problem I'm working on now. We have 250 articles there, and I need to create a chatbot that would allow the users to interact with this content through the chat interface and get the answers to their questions. And what we will get as a result, I will show you here. We have a standard chatbot that just uses a simple standard RAG system, and here I'm just asking what can InfraNodus be used for, and it just gives me a very generic response that's not really covering all the breadth of what the tool can do. Whereas here, as you can see, I have a much more structured response because I provided that additional data about this knowledge base that I'm using from InfraNodus. So you see it's much more structured, it covers the most important topics. So I'll show you how you can do all that, and you can apply it both to analyzing websites, support portals, but you can also upload a bunch of PDF files, for instance, some research you're working on, and apply the same procedure to it as well, and really kind of steer how AI is thinking about your problem and how it's generating responses. So I'll show you how all of this works in one video, so it's going to be a very feature-dense episode. I spent a lot of time researching it, and I'm very excited about it because I think it will just really provide a lot of value to all of you. So keep watching if you're interested to learn how it works, and also subscribe to this channel so that this video can get recommended to other people interested in the same stuff. So let's dive right in. First, I will refresh a few concepts and explain how they work for people who want to learn more about this whole field. First of all, RAG. So RAG is something that we use to retrieve information from data. This is especially useful when we work with a specific context because, for instance, if I'm working with ChatGPT, when I ask it a question like here, what is InfraNodus, it just provides me a general response from the totality of its knowledge base. So it's very general, and sometimes it will not have an answer, or sometimes it might hallucinate an answer. So that's not something that's useful for us. This is why people developed something that's called RAG, or retrieval augmented generation. And the way that RAG works is very simple. I will show you here using an example in Dify, which is a great open source tool. You basically have a knowledge base ingested into your database. So in this case, it's all the support articles, about 250 of them. And when I ask, let's say, how to import CSV files, what happens is that the underlying AI system represents this query as a vector, which is basically a sequence of numbers, but you could imagine it as something in multidimensional space. And then it retrieves the embeddings, they're called the vectors, for all the chunks of text in your database and tries to find the vectors that are closest to those. So it's like it's trying to find which points in the multidimensional space are the closest to each other. And when it finds the top three, it shows me them here. And usually it provides really good responses if your query is very specific. So here I'm using the words like import CSV files. So it finds everything with CSV, import files, and then it shows me quite relevant results here. And then what happens is that it feeds those results into the prompt to the model and adds them to your question. So actually what the model sees is this question here plus these chunks that it retrieved, and then it generates a response based on this additional context. And I'll show you how you can also make a very specific prompt to kind of make sure that this happens. Here, for instance, you see it has the original query, and then it says, okay, also add this context, don't hallucinate, and so on. So I'm going to show you how you can do all that to ensure the quality of responses. But the problem with this RAG approach, and that's like a big problem, that as soon as you ask a general question, it doesn't work so well. Because if I ask, for instance, how does it work, and I click test, it's just going to retrieve stuff that relate to does it work, like it doesn't understand that how does InfraNodus work, and so on. It might get it a little bit from the context, but it's not going to be too precise. So this is why the quality of the responses deteriorate when the questions are too general, when the user doesn't know what to ask, or when they're just too short, or when there is a typo and stuff like that. So this is why we need to augment this system with something else that would ensure that good responses are provided. And people have a lot of ways of doing it. One popular approach is, for example, graph RAG or hybrid RAG, where they use the underlying graph structure. And this, I'm going to make a separate video about this. This is more complex. Today, I just want to showcase something very simple, something that everyone can use and have set up in just a few minutes. And the basic approach here is that we need to give the model the awareness of the knowledge base underneath, not just extract the chunks based on the user query, but for it to have a general understanding of what it's about. And the best way to do this is to use a tool that I developed that's called InfraNodus. I say the best because I haven't seen any other tool that can do that. You basically ingest all this knowledge base inside InfraNodus. It visualizes it as a knowledge graph where the concepts are the nodes and co-occurrences are the connections. So it's kind of like a simplified way of representing how the model sees your original knowledge base. And then what you do is that you identify the main topics inside, so you can see them here. I see that my knowledge base is talking about graph dynamics, AI workflow, idea exploration, search context, and stuff like that. Most influential concepts and a bunch of other very important data. And then what we can do is just to generate some kind of prompt for a model just by clicking this button in the notes panel that will tell me, okay, here is a list of the main topics, as you can see here. Here is the list of the topical gaps, conceptual gateways, relations, and so on. And then we feed that information. So I just copy and paste this information and I feed it into my AI workflow. For example, here in Dify, I have a prompt in this workflow. So I just copied it here and I'm just augmenting my original query or the user's query with this extra information about the actual underlying knowledge base, so that when it extracts the data and when it thinks, it tries to also take all of those elements into account. And then the answers that you will get are much more precise, because in the first case you will get something like this. It just extracts some random stuff and gives you more or less random answer. And in the other case, with this extra data from InfraNodus, you get something like that, where you get highly structured response. You make sure that it covers all the topics that are important to you. And I will also show you how you can use InfraNodus to make sure that you add some important elements of your knowledge base into the prompt, so you make sure that the model will always focus on the most important stuff and never let go of them, even if the user query is too general. So this is kind of like how the approach works and how it improves itself through this extra metadata. You just ingest this knowledge into InfraNodus, analyze it. This is also very good for you to know what is the underlying data, because you understand better what questions you can ask. And then you just paste this data into your favorite AI workflow development tool. It can be Dify, but if you use ChatGPT, you could even do it here. Like if you go into workspaces, I'll show you using the example of Open-WebUI, for instance. Like you can just paste this prompt here, and then this chat is going to take all of this into account. So you really can do this with any tool, and it's just as simple as generating data here and then pasting them into your favorite open source UI for your models, or even into ChatGPT, into custom prompts or into workspace prompts. So this is as easy as it gets. So let me demonstrate the whole approach step by step, from ingesting the data to actually creating this workflow. I think it will be interesting for you, and you can also kind of like try it at the same time using maybe a bunch of PDFs. You can also ingest the website and so on. So here I'll just define the problem again. I have this support portal of Nodus Labs where there is 250 articles on how to use InfraNodus, various approaches, a lot of information about the underlying methodology on cognitive variability and ecological thinking, and then network theory concepts and so on. So there's a lot of data, and sometimes it's really hard for users to find something specific here if they just use search or if they have to read through all the different articles. So I wanted to develop a chatbot that I could embed on the website that people could use if they like to interact with this information in a different way. So the first step for me then to give the context to the model that I will be using to build this chat. And if you use a tool like Dify, you can actually do that. If you go to knowledge and then you say you want to create knowledge, and then you say you want to import files. For example, if it's a bunch of PDFs, you can just browse them here. But if you want, you can also sync it with the website. And here they have a really good integration with the tool that's called Firecrawl. And Firecrawl is a tool which was developed by Mandible AI, which basically allows you to import any sort of content from any website. So you have to go to crawl here and put in any URL, and then you can say that you want to crawl 200 pages with 10 minimum depth, and then it's going to extract the whole website. But the cool thing about it is that it extracts it as MD files, markdown files, so plain text files without all the HTML junk. So they're very easily understood by any LLM model. And that's why it works really well. So you basically put in a link to the support portal here, or any website that you want to analyze. Maybe you want to make a chatbot with the websites of your competitors. I don't know. Like, you can basically analyze anything you want here. Specify how many pages you want here. So for example, 400 can be nice, maximum depth 10 to make sure it really goes deep and follows the links. And then once you do that, it's going to take some time, and then it will generate a knowledge base for you. And the way that it looks is going to be something like this, where you will have a list of links with some metadata, and then you can also test the retrieval, which is what I was doing in the first example. And you can also embed files. So for example, I had another workflow where I just exported the markdown files, which you can do in activity logs here. If you click on documents, you can export them as markdown files, and then you simply upload them to your favorite tool. So for example, if you're not using Dify, but you're using something like Open-WebUI, which I have in this case, you cannot integrate it with Firecrawl. So what you would do, you would go to workspace and then go into knowledge, and then you would create new knowledge here. So you would just add new knowledge and say that this is support portal, create it here, and then you just upload these empty documents here, upload files, and then you have your knowledge base, and then you can access it from every chat, which is pretty cool. So let's go back to Dify because I'm using it for the demonstration. So once you create the knowledge base, what you can do is now you can refer to this knowledge base. And the easiest way to build a chatbot from this knowledge base is just to use their templates. So you go to the studio and then you go chatbot, and then you say that you just want to create a new chatbot from blank, and you can use the one that is for the beginners. I'll show you later how you can do the chat flow, but here I'm just going to do test app, create. And all you need to do is to connect the context. So you will say that you want to use this support portal as the context, and then you need to write a prompt. And that can be quite complicated if you don't know how it works. So this is why I created an article on our support portal that gives you an example of a prompt that you can use. So you can just copy and paste everything here, and then you can modify it with your own data. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy and paste this prompt here. And then I'm going to go back to Dify and I'm going to paste it here. And then this part is the part that you want to change for your content. So I'll just give you information about this prompt in general. So here it just says that you're an expert in InfraNodus, but you can replace it with something else. And then it says here are the important instructions. And then it talks about the syntax that we will use to define what are the main topics and concepts that we will then extract from InfraNodus. And then some context information here. So that's the actual embedded chunks of text that it found. And then some instructions to not hallucinate, to not make up responses and so on, and be also short and concise. That's my personal preference, and you don't have to have it. So we just need to insert the data that our model will use into this part. And how do we do that? So we ingest the data into InfraNodus, and I'll show you how you do that. So you would basically go to the apps page first. It will take some time to load because it's 250 files, and then you go to file upload, and then you just upload the files that you have from the folder where they are. So in my case, these were MD files that I exported from Firecrawl, and I have them here. And then after some time, it will take time to load and to process them, you will have a visualization that will look like this here. So just take a few moments to load. And the way that it actually visualizes information is that it represents every concept as a node, every co-occurrence as the connection. Then it builds a network graph from them, applies force atlas layout to give you a visualization that shows which concepts tend to belong together more often, and then applies topical detection algorithm that shows you what are the main topical clusters inside. So this is very useful structure and information for you as a person, but also for your model, because it allows you to see what is actually inside and how all those topics are related. You can even use it to estimate the quality of the source data. So for instance, you might find out that maybe some important topics are missing inside. So that would be a really good insight for you to understand that you need to add some more content into this data, right? So that can also be very useful before you actually ingest this data into Dify. But let's say you're sure in your content and you visualize it like that as a graph, and then you see that there are all those topics. If you click here, you see that there is more. So you understand that this support portal is about graph dynamics, AI workflow, idea exploration, search content. Okay, that's great. And then there is other topics on node relations and text analysis. For instance, I assume that, these are kind of all the topics that I wanted to cover. I make sure that there is something about graphs. It detected that there's something about AI, which is really good, and something about idea exploration. So I'm pretty happy with this situation here. I see the main concepts are graph, InfraNodus, idea. That's what it's about, generating ideas with the graph. That's great. And then there are some other stuff like relations. So for example, here I see that the top relations are text network, structural gap, InfraNodus graph, GPT AI, knowledge graph, network analysis. So that's great. These are all the important concepts are at the top. I have them. And then here it's quite nice, those stuff actually. These are kind of like entrance points into the discourse. So I always like to make this analogy with the social network, that a text network is like a social network. And those are the words that have important connections, but they're not connected to so many other words. So it's like the people who know all the VIPs, but they don't hang out with a lot of people in general. These are always good people to approach if you want to get in or to get out of that network. And this is why if I want to kind of see how this discourse can be further developed, how it can be connected to other discourse, this can be like a very useful way of doing that, to also use these approaches. And this is what those nodes are for, that they're called conceptual gateways. So we have all this information here represented, and what you can do is to either manually save it to nodes. If you click on save to nodes, then it will just save them one by one. So you can choose actually what you save, whether you want influential concepts or just the topics or those conceptual gateways here. You just click save to nodes, or relations. You can also save them to nodes, but what you can also do is just click this button, auto generate from analytics for RAG enhancement, and then it's just going to generate all of this stuff at once. And then we have them here. Let me just add the concepts also, and I just copy them, and then I go into my favorite app and I paste this information to the place after the instructions. So this is my prompt. Now it has a kind of like a high level overview of the main ideas inside this knowledge base that I'm using here. And now I can start talking to the bot. So I can be like, okay, what is it about? Let's see if it understands it, because it's very generic. Okay, it understands it's InfraNodus. It's telling me all the things that I can get an overview, see the most important parts, how they're related, choosing a topic. So it's very good actually, because it kind of touches upon all the different aspects of how the tool works and makes sure that all the important elements are mentioned, even when the query is so general. You have another way of building a chatbot, which is much more detailed. Like you can go back to the studio and then chatbot, and then you build like a chat flow, and there you would be able to actually create complex connections, like I have in this case, for instance, that I say, all right, you start first, then you ingest a knowledge base and make a vector search based on user query. Then you will add those chunks at the bottom here. They're shown with the context. So I say that you will use the context, knowledge retrieval. You will use that context to generate the responses. And then you will also use this additional context, which I exported from InfraNodus. So I kind of generate all this information, and then you will provide a response. So it's basically the same thing that we just did previously, but where you have much more control over each step. So for instance, what you can also do is to add this data between those two steps when the user has a query, and then you could provide the context, ask the model to rephrase that query to be more relevant to the knowledge base, then you do the retrieval, and then you generate the response. So this is how you could also augment this workflow. But I just wanted to show you a simple version where it just goes into these simple steps, right? And then we generate the response. And that's when we get this kind of much more structured replies from the model. So this is how it works in a nutshell. I will leave a link to the article where I explain this process step by step with all the links so you can try it out for yourself. It will be in the description to the video. And also, if you use any other tool, for instance, let's say you like to use Open-WebUI, like I said, you just upload the knowledge base here. You need to make sure that you specify embeddings before in the admin settings, but you basically upload any collection of documents here, and then you need to go into make new chat, choose the model, and then you add the system prompt here into the chat. You could also, if let's say you only want to chat to that knowledge base, you could just add it into the admin settings, and then you would have this prompt applied to all the chats. So this is how you would do it here. And if you use something like ChatGPT, when you create a new workflow, you can actually add a system prompt for that particular workflow project. So that's also how you could do that in ChatGPT. And finally, if you use something like Notebook LM, which is a really nice tool that allows you to generate podcasts from any text, like you could take, let's say here I have a book that we wrote, and I uploaded like a PDF file, and then I can give it an additional instruction. Let me just show you actually from the beginning, because I think you can only do it when you create a new one. So I create a new one, I upload the stuff, and then I click customize, and this is where I can provide specific information about this context and kind of guide this podcast that will be generated in the direction that I want to have it developed in. And I'll make another video on that, because I've been playing around with it a lot and it's pretty nice. But for Notebook LM, what you can find really useful is to actually identify the blind spots here. So InfraNodus can show you what are the gaps in your discourse, what are the kind of like main things that are missing, and then you can feed this information to Notebook LM and ask it, okay, focus on that gap when you're having a discussion. And then the discussion will go in the direction of what's missing in this discourse. And this can be a really great approach. Like if you have a bunch of PDF papers, for instance, you upload them there, and then you run the Notebook LM, but with the focus on this particular gap. And so then you download the file and you can kind of learn about this content, but in a way where you're already addressing what's missing inside and how it can be developed further. So this can be also a really nice approach. So that's it for today. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments to this video, and also your experiences using this workflow, if you want me to go into more detail. And please also don't forget to check the link to the article where I explain everything step by step with all the links. And also please support the channel by subscribing it and sharing this video with other people who might be interested in the same stuff. Thank you very much.